Stand before the broken column and let the silence of the canvas deafen you. The first thing that arrests you is not the horrific fissure splitting her torso, nor the cold, crumbling ionic column that replaces her spine. It is her eyes. Dark, unwavering, and terrifyingly alive, they lock onto yours with a gravitational pull that refuses to let you look away. Tears, painted as pearlescent, solid droplets, stream down her cheeks, yet her expression remains stoic, almost architectural in its stillness. This is not the weeping Madonna of Renaissance tradition, begging for divine intervention or viewer pity. This is a radical confrontation. The landscape behind her echoes the desolation of her body, a barren, cracked terrain under a turbulent sky, rendered in stark greens and bruised purples that feel less like a setting and more like an externalization of an internal wasteland. Notice the textural violence Kahlo employs. The skin is rendered with a smoothness that borders on the uncanny, a deliberate perfection that makes the jagged red rupture down her center feel all the more violent. The sharp metal nails piercing her flesh are painted with a meticulous, agonizing precision. You can almost feel the cold prick of the steel against the warmth of the skin. The white medical corset, straps cutting into her sides, serves as the only structure holding her together, a grim juxtaposition of support and confinement. Her color palette here is a masterclass in emotional dissonance. The vibrant, fleshy ochres of her skin clash against the sterile, ghostly white of the sheets wrapping her hips, a visual nod to the hospital beds that became her second home. The background is washed in moody, tempestuous blues and grays, creating an atmosphere that is breathless, suspended in a moment of eternal ache. Historically, this approach was a seismic shift in the canon of art history. For centuries, the female form in art was largely a vessel for male projection, an object of desire, a mythological nymph, or a domestic ideal. Women were looked at. Rarely did they look back with such searing agency. Kahlo shattered this dynamic. She turned the easel inward, using her own visage not out of vanity, but out of necessity. I paint myself because I am so often alone, and because I am the subject I know best, she famously stated. But looking at the broken column, we understand that knowing herself meant dissecting herself. She stripped away the polite veneer of femininity to reveal the raw architecture of survival beneath. Philosophically, Kahlo establishes art as an unvarnished diary of the flesh. She transforms the private, often shameful experience of physical suffering into a monumental public declaration. In this block of visual silence, she forces us to acknowledge that pain is not merely a sensation to be medicated or hidden. It is a fundamental, perhaps even beautiful, component of the human condition. The beauty here is unbearable, not because it is pretty, but because it is true. It is the beauty of endurance. By painting her wounds with such intricate care, she sanctifies them. She elevates her broken body to the status of a relic, demanding that we witness her reality without flinching. Her self-portraits are visceral experiences that bypass the intellect and strike directly at the nervous system, reminding us that to be embodied is to be vulnerable. In The Broken Column, the metal nails do not just pierce her skin, they pierce the barrier between the viewer and the artist, creating a shared space of empathy that is as uncomfortable as it is profound. To truly grasp the vocabulary of Kahlo's brush, we must descend into the crucible of her biography, not as gossip, but as the origin story of her visual language. The catastrophic bus accident of 1925, which left a teenage Frida. To truly grasp the vocabulary of Kahlo's brush, we must descend into the crucible of her biography, not as gossip, but as the origin story of her visual language. The catastrophic bus accident of 1925, which left a teenage Frida with a broken spinal column, a shattered pelvis, and a life of chronic agony, was the genesis of her artistic identity. It was in the confinement of her recovery, observing herself in a mirror mounted above her bed, that she began to translate her fragmented reality into paint. This trauma became the very fabric of her canvas. When we look at the intricate, vein-like roots in paintings like Roots, or the bloodlines connecting the two figures in the two Fridas, we are seeing a neurological map of her pain. Her style, a unique fusion of the retablo tradition of Mexican folk votive paintings and the dream logic of surrealism, was forged in this fire. However, unlike the surrealists who painted nightmares, Kahlo insisted, "I never painted dreams, I painted my own reality." Analyze the potent symbolism in Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird. The composition is dense, claustrophobic even, with lush tropical foliage pressing in from the background. But these leaves are not merely decorative. They are vast, vibrating with a life force that threatens to consume her. Around her neck hangs a necklace of thorns, piercing the skin until it bleeds, a clear allusion to Christ's crown of thorns, appropriating religious iconography to depict her own martyrdom of love and physical suffering. Yet hanging from this instrument of torture is a dead hummingbird. In Mexican folklore, the hummingbird is a charm for luck and love. Here, it is black, lifeless, a heavy pendant of despair. This subversion of symbols is classic Kahlo. She takes the talismans of her culture and twists them to reflect her personal truth. Consider the animals that frequently populate her frame. The black monkey on her shoulder, often a gift from her husband Diego Rivera, is not just a pet. In art history, the monkey often symbolized the devil or lust, but for Kahlo they are tender, protective, yet undeniably wild companions, surrogates for the children she could never bear, and symbols of the untamed, chaotic love she shared with Rivera. Their relationship, volatile and all-consuming, is etched into the very pigments she used. The duality of her identity is another recurring motif that she dissects with surgical precision. In The Two Fridas, she splits herself into the European Frida in a high-necked Victorian lace dress and the indigenous Frida in colorful Zapotec attire. The heart of the European Frida is cut open and bleeding, clamping a surgical hemostat to staunch the flow, while the indigenous Frida holds a small portrait of Rivera, her heart whole. This is a visual articulation of Mexicanidad, an embrace of her indigenous heritage as a source of political and personal strength. She wore the Tijuana dress not just as fashion, but as armor. It covered her broken body and asserted her allegiance to a pre-colonial identity. Every element in her work, from the pre-Columbian artifacts she collects to the specific flora of Mexico, serves as a visual metaphor for resilience. She constructed a self that was a mosaic of broken pieces, held together by the gold leaf of her culture and her will. The beauty in her work is unbearable because it is forged from the ugly, difficult materials of life: blood, plaster corsets, betrayal, and steel. Yet, through her alchemical touch, these elements are transmuted into icons of power. She teaches us that identity is not a fixed state, but a constant act of creation and recreation, a narrative we write with our own blood and breath against the blank canvas of existence. As we step back from the intimate intensity of Kahlo's canvases, we are left to reckon with the profound philosophical resonance of her oeuvre. Frida Kahlo did more than paint her autobiography. She crafted a visual philosophy of existence that champions the transformative power of the authentic self. Her legacy is not merely one of aesthetic innovation, but of spiritual and social disruption. She challenged the sanitized, polite narratives of womanhood and beauty that dominated the early 20th century, and in doing so, she opened a door for every marginalized voice that followed. Her unapologetic display of facial hair, the prominent unibrow and the faint shadow of a mustache, was a radical rejection of the male gaze. She refused to prune herself for the consumption of others. In a world that constantly demands women to shrink, to smooth over their rough edges, and to hide their pain, Kahlo amplified hers. She turned her flaws into her signature, her brokenness into her centerpiece. Philosophically, her work argues for resilience not as a bouncing back, but as a deep, integrating acceptance of life's fracture. She demonstrates that one can be broken and whole simultaneously. Her art resonates so powerfully today because we live in an era desperate for this kind of authenticity. In a digital landscape often curated for perfection, Kahlo's bloody, tear-stained, unflinching honesty cuts through the noise like a knife. She has become a global icon, adorned on tote bags and t-shirts, but we must be careful not to commodify her into a hollow symbol of girl power. Her power was not soft or easy, it was forged in fire. She is a figurehead for feminism, for the LGBTQ+ community, and for the disability rights movement, because she inhabited all these identities with a fierce, regal dignity. She proved that the personal is indeed political, and that the domestic sphere and the interior landscape of the body are battlegrounds worthy of high art. Her influence permeates contemporary art, seen in the confessional works of Tracey Emin or the identity politics of Cindy Sherman. But beyond the art world, she teaches us a lesson about the human spirit. She shows us that creativity is a survival mechanism. When her body failed her, her imagination sustained her. When the world confined her to a bed, she created a universe on canvas, where she was the queen, the victim, the lover, and the god. Her gaze, which we met in The Broken Column, follows us out of the gallery and into our lives. It challenges us to look at our own scars, our own dualities, and our own suffering with the same curiosity and reverence. Ultimately, Frida Kahlo's unbearable beauty lies in her refusal to look away from the horror and the wonder of being alive. She invites us to acknowledge that while we cannot control the tragedies that befall us, we have absolute agency in how we frame them. She framed hers in gold and vibrant cobalt, surrounded by monkeys and thorns, and signed it with her own blood. Her life's work stands as a testament to the idea that art is not just a mirror to reflect the world, but a hammer with which to shape it, or in her case, a brush with which to heal it. As we leave her world, we carry the echo of her resilience, a reminder that within our own fragility lies an indestructible capacity for creation. What aspect of Frida's raw honesty speaks to your own experience? Does her transformation of pain into beauty change how you view your own struggles? Join the conversation in the comments below, and subscribe to Echoes of Modern as we continue to explore the artists who dared to paint the unseen truths of our lives.